Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I'm here today to continue reading our book that we've been reading, Searching for Dragons by Patricia C. Wrede, the second book in the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, published by Scholastic. We're going to pick up where we left off, where King Mendenbar had taken the scales that he found in the burned out part of the Enchanted Forest and brought them to see Morwen, the witch, who had showed him that they had been enchanted to look different, but they really were all from one dragon, and had told him to go see the King of Dragons, Kazul, who we know from the first book in this series, dealing with dragons. However, he stopped by the castle on his way, and the wizard Zemnar, head of the Society for Wizards, had stopped by and told him some things about Kazul's princess, which may or may not be true. But we're going to pick up with chapter 5, which I'm very excited about because now we're going to see Serene again. And since you have probably all listened to our first book that we read in this series, you know that Serene is a pretty cool character. Chapter 5, in which there is a misunderstanding and Mendenbar does some plumbing. The awkward lump of wizard magic was right where Mendenbar had left it. He studied it for a moment and then drew his sword. "Your Majesty," said Willen from the doorway, "what are you doing?" "Cleaning up after our visitor," Mendenbar replied. "Do be quiet for a minute, Willen. I need to concentrate." "But—" Mendenbar shot an irritated look at Willen. The castle steward broke off and closed his mouth in a thin, disapproving line. Mendenbar waited half a moment longer to make sure the elf was not going to say anything, and then turned back to the lump. Raising the sword, he reached out over the loop of enchanted forest magic and stuck the point into the center of the mass. A surge of power ran through the sword as it sucked up the wizard's leftover and sent them to reinforce the invisible network of enchanted forest magic. The surge was stronger than Mendenbar had expected, and he frowned as he lifted the sword away from the now empty space and put it back in its sheath. Perhaps it hadn't been extra unused magic, after all. Perhaps Zemnar had deliberately left it a spell behind. It was too late to test it now, though. The sword was thorough, and whatever the lump had been, it was gone now for good. Your Majesty?" Willen's voice sounded much more tentative than it had before. Mendenbar almost smiled, but Willen was sure to get upset if he thought he was being laughed at. So Mendenbar kept his face stiff and took a little longer than necessary to undo the loop he had left to guard the wizard's magic. When he was positive that his expression was normal, he turned. "Yes, Willen." "What was that about? Has my lord the head wizard gone? Why are you wearing your sword? What—" "One thing at a time," Mendenbar interrupted. "Yes, Zemnar is gone. He cast a vanishing spell, and a very good one, too. No smoke, no whirling dust, just poof, and he was gone. Unfortunately, he wasn't as tidy with the end of his spell, and some of it got left behind. Or at least, that's what I thought it was until I got rid of it a minute ago." "I see," said Willen in a tone that meant that he didn't. "And that's why you have your sword?" "Partly." Mendenbar looked at the empty patch of floor where the wizard had been and then shook his head. Whatever Zemnar might have been up to, it would have to wait. I have to pay a visit to the King of Dragons. Willen's face went completely blank. "You what?" "I'm going to the Mountains of Mourning to see the King of Dragons," Mendenbar repeated, "and I'm certainly not going without a sword. There are lots of dangerous creatures in those mountains, and some of them wouldn't care that I'm King of the Enchanted Forest, even if they bothered to stop for an introduction before they attacked." "But you can't just leave, Your Majesty," Willen said. "A formal embassy to the King of the Dragons will take weeks to arrange. You'll want a full escort, and—" "I don't think there's time," Mendenbar broke in before Willen could get too involved in planning. "Something's come up, and it needs to be dealt with now. So I'm going today, in another minute, and you're in charge of the castle until I get back." In sudden inspiration, Mendenbar pulled the key to the castle out of his pocket and handed it ceremoniously to Willen. "I'm deeply honored by Your Majesty's confidence," Willen said, "but are you sure this is necessary?" "Yes," Mendenbar said. "Oh, and don't let any wizards in while I'm gone. Something funny is going on, and I don't want any of them inside the castle until I figure out what, especially if I'm not here." But what should I tell them if they ask for you? I don't care, as long as you don't let them in, Mendenbar replied. Is that all? Then I'm going. He took hold of a strand of magic and pulled. When the misty whiteness cleared away, he was standing among the trees of the enchanted forest, just outside the castle. With a bit more care, he chose another magic thread and pulled again harder. This time he appeared at the very edge of the forest, where the mountains of morning began. 2 paces in front of him, the vibrant green moss stopped as if it had been sliced away, and the dry gray rock began. He checked to make sure that this was the right place. Morwen's directions had been very specific, and then reluctantly stepped over the boundary. Mendenbar had not left the enchanted forest for over 3 years, not since he had become king, and he had forgotten how very barren everything felt outside. He could still sense the free-floating network of magic behind him, but where he stood the air was empty. Thin grass and scrubby brushes grew in patches, wherever dirt had accumulated in low spots and cracks and corners. Ahead, the mountains rose high and sharp and dead. Many magical creatures lived here, but the Mountains of Mornings had no magic of their own. Mendenbar could feel the emptiness where the magic should have been, and he shivered in spite of himself. At least I don't have to worry about finding Gazul, he told himself. As long as I don't get my directions mixed up, I should be able to walk straight to her cave. He smiled suddenly. And it will still be there when I get to it. That was worth something, and he still had some of the magic of the enchanted forest along with him in the form of his sword. Even through its sheath, Mendenbar could feel the reassuring pulse of power. Well, there's no sense in putting it off. He shrugged and took a last look back at his forest and started walking. Once he got used to the dry, dead, magicless feel of the mountains, Mendenbar actually enjoyed the walk. Much as he loved the enchanted forest, he had to admit it was nice to see so much sky. Since dragons liked high places, the walk was mostly uphill, but that was fun too. With no trees to block the view, Mendenbar could see for miles, and the higher he got, the more he got to see. The hills in the enchanted forest tended to either be low, rolling bumps that you hardly noticed, or steep mounds that were usually home to something dangerous, or magical, or both. Most of the latter were made of something strange too, jasper, or polished coal, or solid silver. There was even one made of glass somewhere along the southern edge of the forest. Some king had built it in order to get rid of his daughter. King's daughter. Princess. Mendenbar's good mood vanished. He'd forgotten about Gazul's princess. And I'll have to be particularly polite to her. No matter how irritating she is, he reminded himself gloomily. If she had as much influence as Zemnar hinted, she could make things very difficult if she took a disliking to him. He wondered why Gazul had kept her. The king of dragons didn't normally bother with a princess, or at least Mendenbar had never before heard of one that did. He came around a curve and saw the mouth of the cave in front of him. There was a wide, flat, sandy space in front of the cave, big enough for several dragons to land at the same time if they were careful about it. The mountain rose straight up behind the cave mouth. Set in the stone over the center of the opening was an outline of a spiky, black crown. As Mendenbar drew near, he saw a tarnished brass handle sticking out of a small hole beside the cave. The handle was level with his waist, and next to it was a sign that read, "Welcome to the Cave of the Dragon King. Pull handle to ring." On the line below it, someone had added in neat letters printed in bright red paint, "Absolutely no wizards, salespeople, or rescuers. This means you." Mendenbar stared at the sign for a minute and began to smile. No wonder Zemnar didn't like Gazul's princess. Well, he wasn't a wizard, he wasn't selling anything, and he certainly didn't want to rescue anyone. He gave the handle a pull. Somewhere in the cave, a bell rang. "Well, it's about time," said a woman's voice, and Mendenbar's heart sank. He heard footsteps coming towards the mouth of the cave, and the same voice continued, "I was hoping you'd get here before I left. The sink is..." The speaker came out of the cave, took a look at Mendenbar, and broke off mid-sentence. "Oh no, not another one," she said. Mendenbar stared at her in utter bafflement. If this was a princess, she was like no princess he had ever seen, and he had seen dozens. True, she had a very small gold crown pinned into her hair, and she was very pretty, beautiful in fact, but she was wearing a blue and white checkered apron with large pockets. Mendenbar had never seen a princess in an apron before. The dress under the apron was rust-colored and practical-looking, and she had the sleeves rolled up above her elbows. He had never seen a princess with her sleeves rolled up either. Her jet black hair hung in plain braids almost to her knees, instead of making a cloud of curls around her face. Her eyes were black, too, and she was as tall as Mendenbar. "Well," she said in an exasperated tone, "are you going to stand there like a lump? Or are you going to tell me what you want? Even though I think I already know." "Excuse me," Mendenbar said. He pulled himself together and bowed uncertainly. "I think there's been some sort of mistake. I'm looking for Kazul, the king of the dragons." "I bet you are," the woman muttered. "Well, you can't have her. I handle my own knights and princes." "I beg your pardon?" Mendenbar asked, blinking. He was beginning to think that the mistake was his. This young woman didn't look like a princess, except for the crown. She didn't act like a princess, and she didn't talk like a princess. But if she wasn't a princess, what was she doing here? "I handle my own knights," she repeated. "You see, I don't want to be rescued, and it would be silly for someone to get hurt fighting Kazul when I intend to stay here no matter what happens. Besides, Kazul has enough to do being king of dragons without people interrupting her to fight for no reasons." "You really are Kazul's princess?" What had Zeminar said her name was? "Oh, yes. Serene?" "Yes, of course. Look, I haven't got all time to argue this. Not today. Could you please go away and come back in a week or so, when things are a little more settled? Or I can direct you to a more cooperative princess if you'd rather not wait. Marchak is a very nice one just now, and he lives quite close by." "No, I'm afraid not," Mendenbar said. He was beginning to think Willen had been right to say that he should wait for a formal audience. "You see, I didn't come to rescue you or anyone else. I'm the king of the Enchanted Forest, and I really did come to talk to Kazul. And it's urgent, so—" "Oh, drat," said Serene. "Are you sure it can't wait? Kazul isn't here right now." "I'll wait for her," Mendenbar said with polite firmness. "As I said, the matter is urgent." Serene frowned suddenly. "Did you say that you were king of the Enchanted Forest?" Mendenbar nodded. "My name is Mendenbar." "Just why is it that you're so eager to see Kazul, your majesty?" Serene said suspiciously. "I ran across a problem in the Enchanted Forest this morning," Mendenbar replied, choosing his words with care. "A witch named Morwen advised me to talk to the king of the dragons about it." "Morwen sent you?" Serene looked surprised, and then thoughtful. "It must be all right, then. Come in and sit down, and I'll see if I can explain." "As you wish, princess," Mendenbar said, bowing. "Just call me Serene," she said, leading Mendenbar into the cave. She bent to pick up the lantern from the floor inside the entrance and added, "My official title is now Chief Cook and Librarian, so I've gotten out of the habit of being called Princess." "Chief Cook and Librarian?" Mendenbar said curiously. "How did that happen?" "Kazul and I decided on it between us after she became King of Dragons last year. You see, the King of the Dragons doesn't usually have a princess, and we didn't want the other dragons grumbling about Kazul breaking with tradition. I was hoping it would discourage the knights a bit, too." "Oh? Well, it doesn't sound particularly noble and knightly to say you've rescued the chief cook and librarian, does it? And it has cut down on the number of interruptions. I used to get 2 or 3 nights a day, and now there's only about 1 a week. And the ones who do are at least smart enough to figure out that I'm still a princess, even if the dragons call me chief cook." "Doesn't that make them harder to get rid of?" "Not at all. The smart ones listen when I argue with them. The stupid ones think I'm kidding. I had to offer to fight a couple of them myself before I could get them to go away." Mendenbar peered doubtfully at Serene in the dim lantern light. She didn't look as if she were joking. "You actually offered to fight a knight? 4 of them," Serene said, nodding, "and a prince." "It was the only way to convince them." She looked at Mendenbar uncertainly. "I'm sorry if I behaved badly to you at first, but I did really think that you were here to rescue me. It's the crown." She pointed to the circlet on its head. You wouldn't believe the trouble I've had with some of the princes. Being rude is the only way to get rid of them in a hurry, and sometimes even that doesn't work, especially if they're particularly stupid." "I understand," Mendenbar said without thinking. "They sound a lot like princesses, stubborn, witless, and—" He stopped short in dismay. He'd forgotten for a moment that Serene was a princess, too. He hoped she wouldn't be insulted. Fortunately, Serene didn't seem insulted at all. She nodded. "Exactly. That's why I send the knights and the princes to rescue other princesses. They mostly disturb each other. And of course, I do try to make sure that the nicest knights end up with the nicest princess. I can't help it if they're silly." They had reached a side opening, and Serene hesitated. Then she shrugged and went in. The kitchen's a mess today, she said over her shoulder. But even when it's messy, it's more comfortable for human-type people than the big caves where the dragons go to chat. I can make tea if you'd like some. Make tea, too, if you would like some. Before he could answer, Mendenbar emerged from the side tunnel to a large, well-lit cavern. An enormous black stove took up half of one wall, and the other walls were lined with tall wooden cupboards. A stone sink next to the door was filled to the brim with scummy gray water, and the shelf next to it was overflowing with dirty dishes. In the middle of the floor stood a large wooden table and 3 mismatched chairs. Tea sounds good, said Mendenbar, politely ignoring the dishes. Serene scowled at the sink and began rummaging through the cupboards. Do you mind having your tea in a wine glass? I know it's a little strange, but I'm afraid all the cups are dirty. The sink's been plugged up for nearly a week, and I haven't been able to do the dishes. I don't mind, said Mendenbar, but you'll have to do something about that sink sooner or later, you know. I've tried, said Serene in an irritated tone. Do you have any idea how hard it is to persuade a plumber to come look at a dragon's sink? I thought that I'd finally found one, but he was supposed to get here yesterday morning, and he still hasn't shown up. So he's probably not coming. And there aren't any books on plumbing in Kazul's library, or I'd have fixed it myself. I'm sorry, said Mendenbar. Maybe I can do something about it. Go ahead, Serene replied. You can't make it any worse than it is already. That didn't sound like a vote of confidence to Mendenbar, but it didn't matter. He went over to the sink and studied it for a moment, and then backed up a pace and drew his sword. Serene made a startled noise. Your sword does plumbing? She said, sounding interested. I knew it was magic, but I thought it was for the dragons. It does most things, Mendenbar said absently. Working magic outside the enchanted forest took a lot of concentration. He squinted down the length of the blade of the sink, feeling the power within the sword tingle against his palm. Then he whipped the sword through the air, pushing power out of it to wrap around the sink. With a final flourish, he touched the tip of the sword to the surface of the scummy water. There was a spray of magic, a loud glug, and the water swirled and began running down the drain. There, said Mendenbar. That should do it. He wiped the tip of his sword and stuck it back in its sheath. It certainly should, said Serene. Is your magic always that flashy? What do you mean? Never mind. I'll wash some cups while the tea water is boiling. Sit down while I get the kettle started. Mendenbar sat at the table and frowned suddenly. Oh, bother. What? Morwen gave me some cider to bring to King Kazul, and I was so busy cleaning up after Zemnar that I forgot to pick it up before I left. I'm sorry. I'll have to send it with someone when I get back. Serene stopped short, holding the tea kettle suspended in midair. Zemnar? Not the head wizard of the Society of Wizards. Yes, of course, Mendenbar said, a little surprised by her reaction. Then he recalled how much Zemnar had seemed to dislike Serene. Presumably, Serene felt the same way about Zemnar. And you had to clean up after him? It figures, Serene muttered. She finished filling the kettle and put it on the stove, then went back to the sink and washed 2 cups, 2 saucers, and 2 spoons, with an intense concentration that made it obvious that she was thinking about something else. Mendenbar was happy to let her think. He had a few things to mull over himself. Serene was not at all what he expected. She acted more like Morwen than like a princess. He wondered where she had come from, and how she had gotten captured by the dragons. He nearly asked, but he pulled himself up short before the words left his mouth. He hadn't come to talk to a princess. No, indeed. When will King Kazul be back? He asked instead. Serene did not answer at once. She set the teacup on the table, poured hot water into the teapot to brew, and sat down across from Mendenbar. She studied him for a long moment, and then gave a decisive nod. All right, she said. I'll tell you the truth. I don't know. A wave of irritation swept over Mendenbar. If Kazul didn't tell you when she'd be expected to be back, why didn't she say so at once? Oh, she told me, Serene said. She looked very sober. She was supposed to be home the day before yesterday. And she's not back yet? Serene nodded again. And she hasn't sent a message or anything. She's disappeared. I was just getting ready to go search for her when you showed up. Chapter 6, in which Mendenbar and Serene have a long talk, and Mendenbar reluctantly decides to embark on a journey. Mendenbar took a deep breath. I think you'd better tell me everything you know about this, he said. When did Gazul leave, and where was she going? She left last Monday, Serene replied readily. She was going to visit her grandchildren in the northern part of the mountains. She does that whenever she gets a chance, and sometimes she stays a few extra days. But she always sends word before. She always sent word before when she's done that. She frowned worriedly. Grandchildren? Serene smiled. I know. I was taken aback when I found out about them, too. You just don't think of the king of the dragons as a doting grandmother, but she is. In fact, I suspect she took longer than she had to about the negotiations with the frost giants up there, just so that she'd have an excuse to stay a few more days. Anyway, she was planning on spending a couple of days with them and then swinging through the enchanted forest on her way home. Was she coming to see me? Mendenbar asked, surprised. Not exactly. Serene hesitated. We'd heard someone was growing dragonsbane in one of the valleys along the border, and she wanted to see whether it was true. You can see why I'm worried. Growing dragonsbane? You mean deliberately planting it? There's always been a few patches of the stuff here and there. The way we heard it, there was an entire valley full. That's hardly accidental. Serene lifted the lid of the teapot and peered inside, and then poured a cup for each of them. Gazul wanted to check for herself quietly before any of the younger dragons heard about it. Some of them are impulsive. She didn't want anyone tearing off in a fury to burn down the enchanted forest with no more reason than a rumor. Oh, Lord. Mendenbar pushed his hair backwards on his forehead and grimaced at his tea. I'll bet that's what happened. I wish she'd sent word to me. Serene studied the cup with unnecessary thoroughness. She was afraid that you might be the one doing it. Me? The king of the enchanted forest? You haven't been particularly friendly since she took over, you know. She frowned suddenly. Why did you turn up today, anyway? And what do you mean that's what happened? Don't tell me someone really has started setting fire to the enchanted forest. Almost, said Mendenbar. He explained about the dead area and the dragon scales that he had found. Mormon said that they're all from the same dragon, but they'd been enchanted to look as if they came from several different dragons. I was hoping King Gazul would tell me which dragon they belonged to, and maybe let me ask him a few questions. Let me look at them, Serene said. Mendenbar took the scales out of his pocket and spread them on the table. Serene made a face. I can tell you whose scales these are, all right, but I'm afraid it won't help much. Warwick isn't around anymore. It's a start, Mendenbar said. You're sure these are his? Very sure, but I'm afraid you won't be able to ask him any questions. Serene smiled, as if at a private joke. Why not? Because the reason that Warwick isn't around anymore is that he got turned into a toad a year ago. Do you know how the king of dragons is chosen? By a test, Mendenbar replied, a little puzzled by the question. When a king dies, the crown goes to whichever dragon can carry Colin Stone from the Ford of the Whispering Snakes to the Vanishing Mountain. Yes, well, Warwick poisoned the old king of dragons. Then he arranged with the Society of the Wizards to rig the test so that he would be the next king, Serene said matter-of-factly. It was mostly luck that we found out in time to stop them. When we did, Warwick turned into a toad because of his undragon-like behavior. She sipped at her tea. I think a snake ate him, she added thoughtfully. There were so many things Mendenbar wanted to say in response to this disturbing summary that, for a moment, he couldn't say anything at all. He took a large swallow of tea, which gave him an extra minute to think. Is that why the wizards have been banned from the Mountains of Mourning? He managed at last. Of course, Serene answered, Gazul couldn't do anything more. Even though he knew it was all their idea, it was Warwick who'd actually poisoned the king. Didn't Morwen tell you about it? She was there. No, Mendenbar said. He didn't come up. He shook his head. No wonder Zemdar didn't want to talk about why the dragons don't want wizards in the mountains anymore. Serene nodded. The wizards don't talk about it because their scheme didn't work, and the dragons don't talk about it because the wizards came so close that the dragons are embarrassed to admit it, and Norman is too discreet to spread the story around when the dragons would rather that she didn't. I see. Mendenbar saw considerably more than that. The disagreement between the dragons and the Society of the Wizards was not a minor matter, as Zamnar had rather led him to believe. And Gazul's princess, or rather, chief cook and librarian, he reminded himself, was nothing like the sneaky, manipulative girl that Zemnar had hinted she was either. It looked very much as if Zemnar had been deliberately trying to cause trouble between Mendenbar and the dragons, or at least get Mendenbar off to a bad start with their king. He wondered what Seminar could have said about Morwen if her name had come up. It wouldn't surprise me if the Society of Wizards was behind this, too, Serene said, waving her hands at the scales. It's exactly the kind of twisty scheme that they would come up with. It's possible, Menimer acknowledged, but why would they want us to bring the enchanted forest into their argument with the dragons? Maybe they thought that you'd clean the dragons out of the mountains, or at least reduce their numbers enough so that the wizards will be able to come through without getting eaten. Menimer shook his head. If it came to a fight, the enchanted forest and the mountains of morning would be very evenly matched. A war would cut the wizards off from both places. As long as there was fighting, and it would probably drag on for ages. Seminar must know that. He'd have to have an awfully good reason to start something like that. Maybe he does. Maybe, but I can't think of what it could be. Can you? No, Serene admitted. But if I figure it out, I'll let you know. Meanwhile, is there anyone else that could have done this? Menimer asked, waving at the line of scales on the table. There aren't many people who can get a hold of even one dragon scale, much less 5 from the same dragon. Serene scowled at the table. Rogue's princess might have kept 1 or 2 as a souvenir, but I don't think she'd have this many, and anyway she doesn't know any magic. Suddenly she looked up. Wait a minute. When Warg turned into a toad, a whole batch of scales fell off and scattered. What happened to them? We just left them at the ford, Serene said with a shrug. Nobody thought it was important. Dragon scales last a long time. Most of them are probably still there. At the ford of the Whispering Snakes, Menimer asked. Serene nodded and he grimaced. Anyone who walked by could have picked those scales up any time in the past year. It doesn't narrow things down much. I'm sorry about that, as you are, Serene said. Menimer's face must have shown his surprise, because she gave him an exasperated look and went on, Hasn't it occurred to you that we would want to know who's plotting to get the dragons blamed for their mischief, especially if it turns out not to be the Society of the Wizards? But, if it's not the Society, then you have a new enemy you don't know anything about. Serene nodded again, very soberly. I just wish I had time to look into it right now, but with Kazul missing, it will have to wait. You'll let me know when she gets back. I'll tell Roxime to send you word if she shows up when I'm gone, Serene assured him, and if I find her first, I'll tell her everything that you've told me. I'm sure she'll get in touch with you right away. Thank you. Now, is there anything else you want to know? Because if there isn't, I need to be going, Serene went on. It's a long walk to Flat Top Mountain, and I'd like to get there before dark. Surely you don't plan on walking all the way to the northern end of the Mountains of Morning. He was surprised and suddenly disappointed by this evidence of princess-like behavior. From their brief acquaintance, he thought Serene had better sense. Of course I'm not, Serene replied impatiently. I'm not stupid. I'm going to borrow a magic carpet from Ballimore, the giantess who lives on Flat Top Mountain. Menimer choked on the last of his tea. Do you expect a giantess to loan you a carpet just because you have a dragon with you? He demanded when he could talk again. I'd better not, since I won't have a dragon with me, Serene retorted. Not that that's any of your business. You're going to wander around the Mountains of Morning alone looking for King Kazul, Menimer said, appalled. Exactly, and if I can't find her there, I'll just swing through the enchanted forest on the way back, just the way that she planned to. And it's time I got started, so if you'll just... Oh, no. Menimer set his teacup down so emphatically that it rattled in the saucer. If you're fool enough to travel through the Mountains of Morning without a companion, that's not my concern. But you're not going through the enchanted forest alone. It's too dangerous. I can take care of myself, Serene snapped. You forget I've been living with the dragons for over a year. Maybe so, Menimer said, trying hard to hold on to his temper. But the enchanted forest is very different from the Mountains of Morning. And what do you suppose will happen if the King of Dragons princess, or cook and librarian, or whatever, gets captured or killed or enchanted going through my forest? Serene opened her mouth to reply, then paused. Oh, she said in a very different tone. Oh, I see. That would just cause the sort of trouble that we're trying to avoid, wouldn't it? I'm sorry. I'm used to people objecting to things because they think I can't do them or shouldn't do them. It didn't occur to me that you might have a real reason. Then you won't go, Menimer said with relief. I have to, Serene said in the tones of one explaining something obvious. It is my job. Besides, Kazul is my friend. I'll just have to make sure that I don't get captured or killed or enchanted. That's all. It's not as easy as you make it sound. I know. I visited Morwen a time or two, Serene said. I'll manage one way or another. Mendenbar started to object again, and then stopped. He didn't think Serene was quite as sure of herself as she sounded, but she was plainly determined to go hunting for Kazul. Well, she was right about one thing. Somebody had to find the King of Dragons, and soon. Mendenbar did not like to think of what might happen if Kazul stayed missing for long, especially if rumors about Dragon's Bait in the Enchanted Forest started floating around the mountains. Is there anyone you could take with you? Mendenbar asked. No, Serene said. Roxime and Marchek are the only dragons who have enough sense not to go into fits when they hear Kazul is missing. Roxime is too old for adventuring, and Marchek has to stay and take care of business while I'm gone. And I hope you're not going to suggest that I borrow Marchek's princess. I wouldn't dream of it, Mendenbar said sincerely. Is she very awful? Actually, she's one of the nice ones, Serene admitted, but she's very silly. She'd try, but she wouldn't enjoy it at all, and she'd be more of a nuisance than she's worth. I'd rather take my chances alone. That's almost as bad as taking that princess along, Mendenbar said. He sighed. I suppose I'll have to come with you myself. Serene stared blankly at him for a moment and then began to giggle. It isn't funny, Mendenbar said. I mean it. He was a little hurt by Serene's reaction. He wasn't necessarily stuffy or useless or a nuisance to travel with, just because he was king of the Enchanted Forest. Serene ought to realize that. After all, he'd fixed a sink for her, hadn't he? I know you meant it, Serene said when she could talk again. It wasn't what you said, it was the way that you said it. She shook her head, chuckling. You sound about as eager to come with me as I am to have company, which isn't much. Maybe not, but somewhat. What was that? Serene interrupted, holding a hand up for silence. I didn't hear anything, Mendenbar said. Shh, Serene hissed. She rose and tiptoed to the door, listening. In the quiet, Mendenbar heard a faint thud outside. Serene's lips tightened. Princes or wizards, she muttered. Wizards, I bet. Princes are noisier. Still frowning, she picked up the bucket of soapy water that was sitting beside the door. As she reached for the doorknob, Mendenbar started after her. Serene had not asked for his help, but a bucket of soapy water wasn't much of a weapon against a wizard, if it was a wizard. The corridor outside the kitchen was pitch black. Serene vanished into the gloom, moving with the calm sureness of long familiarity. Cursing mentally, Mendenbar picked his way after her, one hand on the cave wall for guidance, and the other stretched out in front of him to keep him from running into anything. Another muffled crash echoed from up ahead. Mendenbar took 2 more steps, and then his outstretched arm touched Serene's shoulder. A moment later, Serene's voice calmly said, Fragile Spitz. Mendenbar felt magic rise around him. Light flared from the walls, and then settled into a steady glow, revealing an enormous cavern. He and Serene stood in one of the 5 dark openings spaced unevenly around the wall. Halfway across the cave, a tall man in a blue and brown wizard's robe stood hanging onto a staff and trying to squint in all directions at once. His hair and beard were brown, and he bore a strong resemblance to Zemnar, only younger. And Terrell, Serene said in tones of disgust. I might have guessed. I'm glad to see you 2 again, Princess Serene, the wizard said in an oily tone. But who could fail to rejoice at the sight of so lovely a princess? What are you doing here? Serene demanded. Mendenbar was pleased to note that she did not sound at all mollified by Terrell's flattering. And how did you get in without being eaten? Oh, we wizards have our little ways, Terrell said airily. I came because, well, I was concerned about you, princess. I bet, Serene muttered. What do you mean? She said in a louder voice. I thought you might need a friend. And Terrell's voice oozed sincerity, especially after what Father said when he came back from the Enchanted Forest. If King Mendenbar is really getting ready for a war with dragons. Where did your father get that idea? Serene asked in tones of mild interest. And Terrell frowned slightly, as if he had hoped for a stronger reaction. Something the king said to him, I think. I shouldn't have repeated it, I suppose, but I was carried away by my feelings. Sure you were, Serene said. That's why you snuck in here without knocking and went blundering about in the dark instead of calling me, or at least bringing a lamp. I didn't want to disturb King Kazul if she happened to be here, Aunt Terrell said stiffly. Serene snorted. If you really thought that Kazul was here, you wouldn't have come at all. She doesn't like it when people ignore her rules. One of which, I may remind you, was that wizards aren't allowed in the Mountains of Mourning anymore. But if there's going to be a war... There isn't, Mendenbar said, stepping forward into the light. At least not if I can help it. Why are you people trying so hard to make trouble anyway? Antorel's eyes widened, and he sucked in his breath. Mendenbar? Ugh, you'll ruin everything, blast you. He smiled, a sudden, nasty smile. Unless I deal with you both right now. Oh yes, that will do very well. Father will be so pleased. He raised his staff. Mendenbar started towards him, pulling his sword free as he ran, although he knew the wizard was much too far away to reach before he finished the spell. Serene followed quickly, but not quite running, carrying her bucket carefully to avoid spilling. They had only gone a few steps when a swirl of smoke appeared in the air in front of them. The smoke thickened rapidly and then congealed with shocking suddenness into the largest nightshade that Mendenbar had ever seen. It was 2 feet taller than Mendenbar and covered with spikes of coarse black fur. Its beady black eyes glared as it raised a long arm and clicked its dark purple fangs together. It hissed, showing a mouthful of fangs. There, cried Antorel over the nightshade's noise. Vanquish that, Serene, if you can. We're going to stop there for today, right on a cliffhanger, and we'll pick up tomorrow with Chapter 7, in which a wizard makes a mess and a journey begins. Thank you for joining me. Once again, my name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at the Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. We're reading Searching for Dragons by Patricia C. Wrede, published by Scholastic. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye!